Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, one of 3 suspects in the negligent deaths of 14 people in Italy, including 5 Israelis from the same family, reportedly now admitting fault for the tragedy. Meanwhile, Israel and Hamas terrorists meeting for indirect ceasefire talks in Cairo, Egypt. And finally, over 40 years after being discovered, a 1,500-year-old amulet inscribed with the Jewish name for God turned over to the Israel Antiquities Authority. Following up on the tragedy in Italy, 5-year-old Israeli Eitan Biran opening his eyes for the first time since the incident on Sunday. Biran being the sole survivor of a cable car crash in the Alps that killed 14 people, including Biran's entire nuclear family and great-grandparents. But in addition to news of Eitan's slowly improving condition, his aunt in hospital for support, progress in the investigation surrounding the crash coming as well. At least one suspect now admitting responsibility for the disaster.
Nel corso dell'attività di indagine a carico dei predetti sarebbero emersi gravi indizi di colpevolezza in ordine al reato di rimozione o omissione dolosa di cautele contro infortuni del lavoro, dal quale sarebbe derivato il disastro. Il tragico incidente del 23 maggio 2021 sulla funivia Stresa-Mottarone è una grande ferita per il Paese. Desidero quindi esprimere nuovamente il profondo cordoglio del Governo nei confronti dei familiari delle vittime.
According to state prosecutors, 3 suspects, including the cable car's engineer, manager, and service director, arrested over negligent but, quote, conscious actions that led to the deaths. And one of the 3 suspects reportedly now admitting guilt. Investigators explaining that a fork-shaped clamp had been placed on the tram's emergency brakes to deactivate them because they were engaging spontaneously and preventing the cable car from working properly. Additionally, the clamp was fixed several weeks ago as a temporary solution meant to stave off interruptions in the services. But because the clamp was still engaged on Sunday when the main cable snapped, emergency brakes could not function, allowing the car to fall off of the cable entirely into the hillside below. The 5 Biran family members who perished, now flown back to Israel for burial after memorial services in northern Italy were held earlier this week. Now, talks between Israel and Hamas seemingly progressing in Cairo today, long-term ceasefire agreements hopefully in the works. Financial and material aid already now flowing quickly into Gaza after the 11 days of violence between Israel and Hamas terrorists in the Strip. Qatar, for example, already pledging $500 million towards the post-war reconstruction efforts, in addition to the United States' and others' donations. But arguably the most important events happening in Egypt. Officials in Cairo brokering indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas aimed at establishing a long-term ceasefire deal in tandem with reconstruction agreements. And both sides have come with conditions. Israel, for one, demanding that aid actually go to civilian reconstruction and not Hamas's terrorist infrastructure, while reportedly also calling for the return of 2 Israeli civilians and the bodies of 2 IDF soldiers held captive by Hamas since 2014. Hamas, for its part, saying none of the funds will go to the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, claiming that Hamas brings in more than enough money for its military wing through Iran and Arabs, Muslims, and liberals all over the world, while threatening to launch back into war should Israel cross red lines in Jerusalem. No mention made of the Israeli captives. Meanwhile, having left Jerusalem, Ramallah, and then Cairo, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken finishing his Middle East tour in Amman, Jordan. The diplomat again lamenting the loss of life during the Hamas-Israel conflict, especially that of children. But this after having earlier praised Israeli Defense Forces for taking very significant steps to avoid civilian casualties with their targeted airstrikes. Then, as Jordan's King Abdullah praised the reopening of the U.S. consulate in Jerusalem for the benefit of Palestinians, Blinken also again discussing the region-wide plans for Gaza's and the Palestinians' future in terms of the Biden administration's commitment to human rights.
Here today in Amman, my conversation with His Majesty touched on, again, a range of topics, including the urgent work we need to do together to meet humanitarian and reconstruction needs in Gaza, while ensuring that the Palestinian people, not Hamas, benefit from this assistance. We see the ceasefire not as an end, but as a beginning, something to build on. Earlier today, I discussed how we can do this with President al-Sisi and Foreign Minister Shukri in Cairo. Egypt played a crucial role in brokering the ceasefire. It's already committed $500 million to the reconstruction effort in Gaza.
And now joining us with more on the Hamas-Israel ceasefire, former head of the Counterterrorism Bureau at the Prime Minister's office, Brigadier General in the Reserves, Nissan Nuriel. Brigadier General, thank you so much for being with us today. Now, first off, Hamas is saying that Israel barely hit 5% of the underground metro system that they've built, and that we barely made a dent in their military capabilities. They're essentially claiming victory. Israel, meanwhile, saying that they've blasted Hamas back by years, especially with the destruction of over 100 kilometers of the metro system. The IDF also claims that at least 225 terrorists were killed and that the Hamas-given death toll is omitting true numbers of casualties. Who should we believe? What evidence is there for the public to see?
Let me tell you that it's not really important. The only thing that's really important is the next future. If you ask Hassan Nasrallah, he won in 2006. And yet we have 15 years of very quiet border along the Lebanese border. So declaration from the both sides are probably important for their own public, probably important for their own needs. But if you want to judge the future, we need to wait. And I will mark 2-3 milestones in order to understand who won. First is the talking in Cairo. By the term of the long-range ceasefire, we will be able to understand who won. If Hamas accept all the Israeli conditions, it means that he knows what will be the price if he don't do it. So this is one example of something that you can measure. The second thing is how long it's going to take them to decide to open another front. And again, back to the history. After the 67 war, which by all definition we defeat our enemies, it took them few months, in the case of Egypt, to keep the war against us along the Suez Canal, and only 6 or 7 years to open the Yom Kippur War against us. So declarations are important, but it's much more important to see what the future will bring us.
Again, though, could you maybe go into a little bit more about how does the IDF know to what extent they've damaged Hamas's capabilities? Because again, Hamas is saying 5%, while the Israeli Defense Forces are saying that they have much more significantly impacted Hamas.
I cannot get into the details because that will help our enemy to understand how do we know about all the metro project. But if you take only the aerial photo that already published by the accuracy of the aerial attack, if you only can understand by the picture without even measures the right kilometers, you can see that most of those underground tunnels collapsed. And again, the next future will show us if they are going to use it again. I'm going to guess that not only them, also Hezbollah needs to think twice before he build his capabilities on the underground capabilities after we show them that it's not longer something that they can hide from us.
All right, so I want to move on to the ceasefire agreement, the terms. Aside from trying to keep Hamas's hands off of aid and reconstruction materials, Israel is reportedly asking for the return of the 4 Israelis held captive in Gaza since 2014-2015. Why isn't this more of a demand?
Basically, it's a very sensitive issue in the Israeli society, and we need to manage it in a very, very careful way. We all understand that it should be part of the long-range ceasefire, and the question is how to deliver it. The question is how to put it on the table so the other side will be able to accept it and will not feel that even in that area, they are losing everything. So it's gonna be something like take and give issue. We will give you more civilians options, and you will bring our boys back to Israel. And I wish that they understand that it's about time to do it.
All right, Brigadier General Nissan Nuriel, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, as officials in Jerusalem often point out, the threat from Iran is still the greatest existential threat to Israel, and it's seemingly only getting worse. Director General of the United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, confirming that the Islamic Ayatollah regime is enriching uranium to levels of 60% purity and higher. And Grossi explaining that this development is very concerning as, quote, 60% is nearly weapons grade, adding that only countries making bombs are reaching such levels. Commercial enrichment, by comparison, is just a paltry 2 to 3%. Further, Grossi says that reversing this advancement is essentially impossible save for strict verifications, which Iran has been remiss to allow. So, this in mind, Grossi is indicating that a linear return to the 2015 JCPOA nuclear pact is no longer possible, saying, quote, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And the question then becoming whether the P5+1 powers negotiating with Iran in Vienna will take note, particularly with EU, US, and Iranian officials, among others, all projecting confidence that a deal of some kind can be reached. Now, in other news, Israel preparing to lift more and more coronavirus restrictions as top health experts are saying that the nation has essentially reached herd immunity. In fact, Director of Infectious Disease Epidemiology at Sheba Hospital, Dr. Gili Regev Yochai, saying that there's not even any more need to force vaccinations on Israelis aged 12 to 15, though Regev Yochai does say that it is still recommended. In any case, in light of the good news, cinemas reopening across the country for the first time in 14 months on Thursday night, and practically all restrictions on gatherings as well as on the use of the Green Pass system are set to be lifted in the coming days. Nearly everyone is excited for the move, but not everyone. Joining us with opposing insights, Professor Yehuda Adler, internal cardiology medical director and specialist and coronavirus advisor to several local authorities. Professor, thanks so much for being with us. Now, in your opinion, have we indeed reached herd immunity? Because originally Israelis were told that at least 70% of the public would need vaccinations for that to happen.
Yes, we were wrong. We thought that 70-80% is enough, should be immunization to reach herd immunity, but today maybe 60% immunization in Israel, and we have herd immunity. So we reached the herd immunity with 60% from the citizens' immunization.
So should Israel still oblige children between the ages of 12 and 15 to get vaxxed?
No, I think we have to change our attitude towards the children. People who want to do it, they can do it. People who don't want to do it, they shouldn't do it. Children can go everywhere whenever they want. They are not the problem, and we can see it today. And we change our attitude towards the children too by the, you know, all the story with the COVID-19 pandemic is a long story. We studied during the story, during the year, more than a year, about this virus, and today we think I think they shouldn't. It's not as they want. It's not so important.
So what about booster shots? Will adults still need booster shots in about 6+ months' time?
We have a problem in Israel, in my opinion, regarding the Green Pass. 1 week ago, the Minister of Health said it should be till the end of the year because it worked very good, and I agree with him. But 2 days ago, he said now nobody needs the Green Pass, and I don't agree with him because in this stage we have a bad situation in a lot of countries all over the world. Let's see, Argentina, Russia, Hodu. So we are not living alone in the world. We succeeded, and we shouldn't lose the success we reached. So I think this is not the time to take the green pass and to say it's not necessary. Let's say you and me are going to a performance and there are 1,000 people in the performance and one of them is a super spreader and you know the story. It can contaminate a lot of people who are not immunization, and we have nearly 1 million people in Israel, which is a lot, who didn't take the immunization. So I think it's too early, and he shouldn't give a prize to the people who didn't get the immunization. And I think this is a political decision. This is not a medical decision.
So just to follow up, it's my understanding from what you're saying that even if restrictions are lifted, people should still be obeying mask mandates and limits on gathering sizes?
I think we should be careful. We succeeded in now, a big success. All the world are looking in Israel like a big success, and they are right. And we shouldn't lose it because of a mistake of a politician. I think we should be careful, we should be modest, and we should continue use the green pass, and we should continue to take the immunization to the mature people and to wait to see what is going all over the world. As you know, the problem in Israel, the big problem is Ben Gurion. And the British variant came to Israel through Ben Gurion airport. So we have to be very careful. You know, you can't change your mind as a Minister of Health every day. 2 days ago, you said the green pass will be extended till December. Well, now you said you don't need a green pass. This is not the way to deal with going out of endemic. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Yehuda Adler.
Thank you very much.
Now, the fighting with Gaza basically over and pandemic restrictions lifting, the airports in Israel once again overflowing with travelers both entering and exiting the country. But the travel situation is still delicate, with foreign visitors to Israel placed under particular scrutiny before arriving. So what do you do if you're a business owner in need of some expert help from a non-Israeli? Attorney Joshua Pex of the Cohen Decker Pex and Brosh Law Offices joining me with solutions. Thanks so much for being with us.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. So what are the current problems, first of all, in bringing in an expert to Israel?
So in general, the main problem is, as it always has been, is to get the permit. So before you have a permit, you can't even have the expert come in. And getting this permit isn't easy because, as you can imagine, whether you're a foreign company sending an expert to Israel or a local Israeli company wanting to hire a foreigner, you have to prove that the local Israeli can't do the job. Obviously, the authorities in Israel would prefer Israeli to do the work. So in order to bring a foreigner, you have to get special permission.
Wow, I didn't know that. So, but what about, I mean, there are extenuating circumstances, I'm sure. What if I need somebody now? Is there an expedited process maybe?
Yes, there is. If there's something very urgent in special cases, you can even get the application done within 6 working days, but only for a short period of 45 days.
All right, so again, what are the criteria necessary to bring in an expert? You mentioned proving, first of all, that no Israeli can do the job.
Right, so there's criteria that have to do with the area of expertise. First of all, you bring experts usually in terms of high-tech, research, academia, but also the arts. Second, the company needs to show that it's in good standing and that they really can't find anyone else. And then the expert itself also, you need to show that the expert has really unique knowledge and know-how, some expertise. You have to show diplomas, CV, resume, show that only this person can do the job.
Oh, wow.
So it's not that easy.
It's not that easy. It doesn't sound very cheap either. What are the costs associated with this?
Right, it's pretty expensive. You have an application fee of 1,200 shekels. Then once you get the permit and get the visa itself for the working license for a year, you need to pay 10,000 shekels. Wow. Other than that, you have other expenses that have to do with translation of the documents, notarization, getting all the documents in order. And then legal fees as well for lawyers.
Of course.
So it is not a usual process, let's say it that way.
And I'm assuming that the company pays for this on behalf of the expert, or does the expert have any sort of copay situation?
Right, no, the whole process is done through the company itself. They submit the application and they take care of the process. The expert itself, maybe he will pay or she will pay for their own documents, you know, the translation and notarization. But in general, it's a process that's done through the hiring company.
Wow. All right. So is there anything else that I think maybe we need to know about this process that I'm missing here?
So there are experts, foreign experts that come to Israel because at the end of the day, there aren't Israelis that can do everything, and really foreign experts will move the economy forward and teach other local Israelis, help companies grow, and in general benefit the Israeli local economy.
All right. So if you need an expert, I think you can check out the Cohen Decker Pex and Brashla offices for some advice on how to bring them into the country. Joshua Pex, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, now sometimes referred to as a Seal of Solomon, an ancient 1,500-year-old amulet inscribed with the Jewish divine name Yahweh, now turned over to the hands of the Israeli National Treasure Center. Chana Rifkin with the story.
אני מחזיק ביד קמע מהתקופה הביזנטית שנתגלה בחורבת ארבל לפני 40 שנה פחות או יותר על ידי תושבת מושב ארבל, טובה חביב, זיכרונה לברכה. הפריט הועבר לידי רשות העתיקות.
Decades after being unearthed, the family of the late Tova Haviv giving this very special artifact over to Israeli archaeological authorities. And the 6th century pendant cast in bronze, shedding light on Jewish life in the region under Byzantine rule.
הקמע והסצנות שמופיעות עליו מאוד מעניין, ממש מרתק. אפשר לראות בצד הפנים של הקמע דמות של רוכב על גבי סוס, ראשו מוקף בהילה, הוא מחזיק בידו רומח שמאיימת על דמות נשית ששוכבת למרגלות הסוס. אפשר לזהות את הדמות הנשית הזו כשדה שנקראת גיילו, שדה מהמיתולוגיה היוונית, שהייתה מתקיפה נשים בהיריון וילדים קטנים, ולמעשה הסצנה הזו מלמדת אותנו שהקמע נועד להגנה מפני שדים, רוחות, דברים רעים.
Likewise, we can surmise that a woman or a child likely wore the amulet around their necks. Meanwhile, an inscription in Greek around the upper edge of the amulet additionally reads, "The one God who conquers evil," while under the horse figure are the letters iota, alpha, mega, tau, or the Greek spelling of Yahweh, the name of the Jewish God. Then finally, on the backside of the amulet, more imagery in line with the theme of protection, as well as an abbreviation meaning one God.
מהצד השני יש לנו במרכז צורה של עין, זוהי העין הרעה, ולכן הקמע נועד גם להגנה מפני העין הרע, וכל מיני דברים שמתקיפים את העין הרע, מנסים להגן מפני העין הרע.
Now, as for who wore this pendant, both Christians, Gnostics, and Jews populated the region during the 6th century AD, and all are monotheistic, so they're all viable possibilities. But that said, archaeologist Dr. Klein has a pretty clear hypothesis.
בעצם זה שהקמע נתגלה פה, קרוב לבית הכנסת העתיק של חורבת ארבל, ייתכן ומעיד שהקמע נענד על ידי אחד מתושבי היישוב. ואז בעצם הדבר מספר לנו שגם יהודים ענדו קמעות מהטיפוס הזה, טיפוס מיוחד, כשהמטרה הייתה להגן מפני רוחות רעות, שדים ועין הרע.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast again with Chana Rifkin.
And we've arrived at the weekend. Mostly sunny, clear skies expected throughout the next couple of days, with lows in the 60s in Fahrenheit or the 20s in Celsius tonight. Then Friday, tomorrow, temperature highs expected to get into the 80s and 90s or the 30s in Celsius. And Saturday, cooling down just a bit, calling for highs in the 80s or between 27 to 31 degrees Celsius. Shabbat Shalom.
All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.25 shekels to the American dollar and 2.68 shekels to the Canadian dollar. Finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well, have a great weekend, and thank you so much for watching.